know you're in a bad mood.
I'm not in a bad mood.
Well, it's okay to be. You have a reason.
I'm in a not positive mood.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely
not in a bad mood.
You're in a hashtag mood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about though. What are you referring to?
The Bills didn't lose or anything.
Football's over.
Yeah. There are no more games.
None. There are no.
We're now counting down the days to spring training.
Yeah. Speaking of, there might not be a spring training.
What do you mean?
Yeah, they're talking about delaying it and pushing the season again.
Just because of COVID?
Yep.
Yeah.
Arizona actually sent out a letter today saying they want the MLB to not participate in the Cactus League, which is so there's two spring training sites, Cactus and Grapefruit. Grapefruit's in Florida. And I should say two leagues. And the Cactus League, because Arizona's cases are so high, they're saying we don't want to have it here.
Yeah.
And MLB is pretty much saying we don't fucking care.
Well, it was so hard for them to control in the beginning of the 2020 season.
I know.
You'd think they would have learned something.
NFL did it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more people.
It's true. I mean, there was a lot of time in between when baseball season started, kind of in the very early days of COVID, and we didn't know how to deal with it.
Listen,
Maybe we've adapted.
NBA's kind of failing though. They're postponing a lot of games. I think like 20 games have been postponed. Yeah. Welcome to While She's Napping. I am Adam.
And I'm Cindy.
So yeah, last week we talked about the anti-vaxxers. And we got a lot of engagement in terms of downloads and listenership, so we thank you for that. We didn't get any pushback. We actually got, first of all, we got a 5-star review.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Secondly, we got a comment saying this is an important topic to talk about. So apparently a lot of people, I don't want to say are on our side of this because I don't think we really drew battle lines, but they feel the same way or think the same way, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think it's at the top of people's minds. I feel like new parents are faced with this often. We talked about that in the episode, especially if you're someone like me who had some crunchy tendencies. You tend to get inundated with the anti-vax stuff. But with the COVID vaccine rolling out, I think that's kind of reignited this conversation.
Yeah. And, speaking of older episodes, talk to you about this. I do want to sort of make a sequel to the QAnon episode because right now, QAnon's everywhere. From what I'm seeing. Now, this could not be the majority of them. This could just be a small number of them. But from, if you go to r/GabWatch or Parlor Watch or what is it? QAnon, I don't know, something.
Yeah, I don't know.
They're having meltdowns.
I bet.
And the new theory is that Trump will be put in office March 6th. Because apparently, from my understanding, and I could be wrong about this or their reasoning, that was the original date that a president was sworn in.
Okay.
Like way back when
with
Washington and stuff.
Yep.
It was, I guess, in March.
Okay.
So they think that's the plan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be January 6th when Pence was going to turn everything around. And now Pence is the enemy, apparently.
But I do want to revisit it to sort of understand what's going on there.
The fallout.
What this could, basically.
So anyways, speaking of old episodes, speaking of our catalog, if you're listening to us for the first time, we welcome you to the show. Today we're going to talk about unsolicited advice. So if you're a new parent or just in general, if you find yourself getting into situations where people are just giving you advice about anything, your career,
school choice of, if you're talking about school, your choice of study, your major, whatever. This would be a good episode for you and sort of how to handle that, even though we're probably not the best people to model around this.
Right. Well, we're not. Well, hopefully the title of the episode isn't misleading. We're not giving advice. We're going to reflect
it's
on.
Meta.
Yeah, we're going to reflect on advice that we've been given, good or bad.
About advice.
Yeah. And we're going to have an emphasis, I think, a focus on parenting, because I feel like that's when the advice just freely flows in,
Right.
totally unsolicited, at a new level. But we're going to touch on a few non-parenting related things too.
Yeah. So, if you're in for this ride, we welcome. And if you want to dig into our archives, our archives.
You got it.
Yes.
Nailed it.
If you want to look at our catalog of stuff, of audio files in, the previously released episodes of While She's Napping, we invite you to do so. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast fix from, we are there. You can hit up the website, whileshe'snapping.com. The entire audio catalog is there at your disposal. Anything that you want to listen to, please do. If you want to hear about Rhode Island, the state in which we reside in, and you've never heard of the state of Rhode Island before, not Long Island, Rhode Island before, we invite you to listen to that episode. It's one of my favorites. If you're a 90s kid and you like to hear about nostalgic 90s shit, please listen to our 90s episode. That's another one of our favorites. But anyways, it's all there. We're also on the YouTubes. We are basically wherever you get your audio fix from. We appreciate if you subscribe to the show. Just hit the subscribe button very gently. Don't smash it. And speaking of 5-star reviews, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please take the opportunity to give us 5 stars and a quick review right there. And if not, you can do so on our Facebook page.
Yeah, we're on Facebook at facebook.com/whileshe'snapping, on Instagram at whileshe'snapping, and on Twitter at she'snappingpod, or you can email us at whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
There you go. Yeah. Facebook is, I feel like it's crumbling.
It is.
Well, I feel like it's going to go away.
I mean, Facebook and Twitter were both, hubs for all the misinformation. And,
yeah. Even beyond that. Do you think it's reached MySpace status yet?
Oh, it's getting there, I think. Yeah.
Well, MySpace killed itself.
How so?
I think the ability and the freedom to sort of customize your page and to, from my understanding, they didn't keep up with the script behind the scenes in terms of the data control of how much shit people can put on their individual page. Mm-hmm. So when someone put up, GIFs or motion backgrounds and stuff, it really slowed things down. And I think MySpace ended up, it was cluttered and stuff. It was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
Whereas Facebook is uniform.
Right.
So is Twitter.
Yeah. It's adapting.
So I think Facebook's going to go.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for this project, Instagram has been more helpful. I mean, Instagram is owned by Facebook anyway, but still, it seems to be a better platform for this type of interaction.
I wonder if young people still use the Instagram. It's all about the TikTok now.
I know. I've never been on TikTok. And Snapchat.
Oh, what is WhatsApp?
It's like a texting app, but I've never used it.
Is that Messenger? I sound so old.
I don't know. I've never used it. I just know it's a texting app.
I know Facebook owns that too.
They're, pretty much becoming a monopoly.
So how is it not Messenger?
I have no idea.
I don't even know anymore.
No idea. Okay, so let's dive in. So I was thinking there's sort of a logical progression.
Is that Netflix?
Yeah, the Netflix.
What station?
Yeah, how do I change the channel?
Is that the
to
Hula?
Netflix?
How do I get rid of cable?
Okay.
I don't have an Amazon app.
Okay.
I don't have an account. I just ordered stuff. No, Mom, you have an account. Go ahead.
All right. So I figured we could start with non-parenting related things.
Sure.
And kind of go in the progression of life, you know, like, so talk about maybe school or career, professional related advice.
Sure.
And then we can kind of go from there. Then maybe get into some like pregnancy or like birth advice that I got or that you got when I was pregnant.
I got a lot of pregnancy advice.
No, I mean as a dad, like as an expecting dad, you know, anything in that arena. And then we can get into parenting in the second half. So work related and school related. I'm curious if you had any advice that you received, you know, in your high school, college days, that you wish you had taken, or that was just terrible advice that you're glad you didn't take.
Oh, I mean, this isn't unsolicited. Well, I guess when I was a kid in high school, all the advice was unsolicited because I didn't give a shit. So I wouldn't have asked for, you know, advice for the next step. I think the biggest piece of advice that I didn't ask for that, and I'm trying to toe the line not to give this advice necessarily because, you know, runs counter to the topic at hand. But everyone I talked to regarding my aspirations after high school said, go to college immediately. And that just wasn't in my wheelhouse at the time. And the aspect of taking a year off was very attractive to me. More so because I just hated school and I didn't want anything to do with it. But also, I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do.
Right. You weren't being driven by anything in particular.
At the very least, going to a community college just to get the, you know, the basics out of the way, the courses the core courses that you need, regardless of your focus or your major. I could have done that just to get it out of the way. I didn't want anything to do with school at that time.
Yeah. I think I received similar advice. More so, it was always the expectation that after high school I would go directly to college. A gap year between high school and college was never even presented as an option to me. But I had a little bit more direction. I kind of knew what I wanted to do and what type of program I wanted to enroll in. So I was fine with that, and I'm glad I did that. And I think any of the experiential kind of stuff that I could have gotten out of a gap year, you know, some people go into the Peace Corps, they do volunteer work, they do stuff like that. I was fortunate to have those types of experiential opportunities during my undergrad. So that's advice that I think was good, to take advantage of any sort of volunteer, unpaid internship, anything like that in college. But then going from undergrad to grad school, that gap year idea was presented to me again.
But by then you're on a roll.
Exactly. I was like, if I stop now, I'm never going back. Like,
there's a huge difference from going from high school to undergrad compared to undergrad to postgrad, because you know what you're doing.
Exactly. You're on the path. Like, yeah. So again, I didn't decide to take a year off. I went straight through. And it was pretty grueling. I mean, I ended up being in college for 7 years straight between my 4 years in undergrad and 3 years in getting my master's. But I think that advice is very specific to the individual and what it is that you want to do. And if you have an opportunity to make a gap year worthwhile, I think it can be good for some people.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest pushback that I got when, you know, presenting this was, you'll never go back.
Yeah. Yep.
You'll never go back. And this is after high school, or you'll never go. So I shouldn't say go back. And that wasn't the case at all. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew was I wanted to work. It wasn't a career. I just wanted to make money.
And have independence.
Sort of. I was still living in my parents' house.
Right, but you wanted to make your own money and just...
I just wanted money, you know? And I guess I just wanted to be out of the house. I wasn't motivated. And thrusting me back into that environment was a recipe for disaster. It would have led to inevitable failure.
Yeah.
But then you came along. And I
whipped you into shape.
Shit. Got to figure out what I want to do. And I still don't know. I'm 35 and I still don't know.
That's okay.
But yeah, then I went to school, and it was sort of fun to stick it into the people's faces that said you'll never go. And I went.
Mm-hmm.
Magna cum laude.
Wow.
Is that what I finished as?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's how you
Magnum
finished.
cum laude.
Oh my God. Okay. So that's some of our memories of
Graduating Magnum cum laude.
Oh my God.
And
yeah. So you
philosophical, analytical skills.
So I think you get a lot of unsolicited advice when you're at that point in your life, but I think it's more expected because you're kind of at a point where you could use some direction and guidance. In a lot of cases, I feel like when you become a parent and you're, an adult and you're a different phase in life, I think there's a tendency for the advice to be more unsolicited, if that makes sense. I feel like as a younger person in college, I was more, even though I think there's a sense of feeling like you know everything.
Sort of receptive to it.
Right. I think you're kind of expecting it. You're receptive to it. You're kind of figuring your shit out. You don't really know what the best next step is. You have a lot of options in front of you. So I think that advice is more well received in that phase of life.
I mean, it depends on the individual because
and how the advice is presented.
Right. If you're a smart ass teenager like I was, much like I was, I didn't want to fucking hear from anyone. I didn't want anyone to tell me the path I should take. I just knew it's one of those things where if someone said, "Hey, you should apply for this job if you're not going to school," okay, I'm receptive to that. If it's like, "Hey, if you're not going to go to school, maybe look into this."
Right. I think when it's presented as
you have to go to school.
Yeah, it's like an ultimatum or pigeonholing you into one option.
And I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yep.
So I will offer that. Well, I did offer that resistance. And, if anybody is within the same sort of scope here, the younger listeners that are coming out of high school, if there are any, do what you got to do. I mean, this is unsolicited advice from someone that just complained about unsolicited advice, but do what you got to do. If you feel schooling right out, like post high school, college, whatever, is not right for you, I highly recommend just taking the year off and figuring your shit out. Unless you know. If you know, then go.
Yep.
All right, we can talk about being an adult, I guess.
Yeah, so I think kind of the only other thing I wanted to mention about sort of like professional career related advice, I actually got some really helpful. It wasn't really presented as advice though. I feel like it was just more something that was learned in a like a training leadership type class that I was taking with a group of my colleagues.
It's not unsolicited.
I guess it wasn't unsolicited, but I feel like I've heard it presented in different ways in the past as sort of unsolicited advice. And maybe it was the way that it was presented to me, or maybe I was misinterpreting, but it didn't really hit home until recently. But it was really good advice for me. So, I have always sort of viewed, some of my tendencies as weaknesses, at like being more introverted in certain scenarios.
Can't be introverted if you're doing a podcast.
So that's what I'm saying. In certain scenarios, like this is just you and me talking in our basement.
No one's listening.
Well, still, I'm saying in a large.
We got countries,
like,
baby.
If I'm at like a conference
or
something,
we got people from Egypt. What up, Egypt?
Yes, but it's different. They're not sitting in front of me, but I'm saying. In large groups, I tend to be very reserved and hesitant to throw an idea out there or say something because I think it's going to sound stupid, or take a creative spin on something. And that and sort of this like approach with empathy is kind of how I tend to just be like. And I've always been sort of envious of people who have a more assertive personality, who will just interrupt to say what they have to say in front of a group and all of that. So anyway,
that's your boy.
Yeah. Opposites attract, I guess. So the advice I got was, play to your strengths and don't shy away from your natural tendencies. Like, it's one thing to challenge yourself, but it's another thing to try to just be like someone else because you think that that's the right way to be a leader or the right way to be heard or whatever. And so since then, I've kind of doubled down on trying to strengthen my natural skills and use them to my advantage rather than trying to mimic or imitate other leadership skills that don't come naturally to me. So I feel like that's probably not an uncommon thing when people doubt themselves and they're looking at other people and their leadership styles or their, way of going about whatever it is that you do for a living. And so that has made a huge difference for me. And
so
I
this
wish
is
I
a
had
positive.
It is. It's a
Usually
positive.
when people think about unsolicited
I know.
advice,
So what I'm saying is, I feel like that has been said to me in the past, unsolicited, and I feel like I was just like, no, I have to do better. I have to be more like this. I have to, I should lead a meeting like this person does, and I should present myself like this person does. And eventually I realized that there was some wisdom to that, and it's benefited me now to actually put that into practice.
I don't think that's bad advice, but I also think being fluid in your approach and adjusting to, not just sort of cornering yourself and be a slave, for lack of a better way to put it, to your personality is necessarily beneficial. And again, this is unsolicited advice, but I mean, I do think a middle ground is called for sometimes.
Yeah, so I'm not saying
Like
don't
if
ever
you're
challenge yourself.
super introverted.
Don't go. I'm not saying never go outside your comfort zone.
That's what I'm saying.
Or never challenge yourself, but don't try to change who you are. Like your core natural talents, you can build on those to make them real strengths and have those be an asset to whatever it is that you're doing. Without like for me, I was like, well, I can't be introverted. I can't be shy. I can't be afraid to speak my mind. But there are times where, sitting back and taking a minute to really think through what I want to say and then saying it at the right time is better than if I had just forced myself to say it right there in the moment and maybe not have it be as well thought out as it could have been and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like advice that is, well, knowing you and what you do, that's, beneficial directly to what you do. I find that the unsolicited advice on the whole, or if not the majority of the times, is the advice that you don't want, but the advice that you do want is never given, ever.
Yeah.
And it's not clear. Like, so when it comes to podcasting, for instance, like the other shows that I do and have done, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm moderately okay at it, but I would just like to have a sort of path or a dictation to say, these are the steps to do it. And I would follow that. It's not out there, or a career path. Like, I don't have a career, I have a job. And it would be really good if someone said, hey, you'd be good at this. This is the way to do it. And instead I have these, roadblocks of, okay, you'd be really good at this, but unfortunately you don't have experience. And even though we say no experience required,
yeah,
you don't have so I'm sort of stuck in this hole, and no one has a way out of that. So I'm just like, all right, fuck it. I'm just mediocre, and this is where I'm going to be. All I have is this.
I guess this is all there is. Yeah. I think in that case, when you're talking about your professional life or your career, kind of, wrapping up the conversation on college and finding your path in that sense, I think that's where things like mentorship come into play. Like if you find someone who's been down that path or is successful in whatever it is that you want to do, because then you have a person who is specifically, like you've basically asked them for guidance. It's no longer unsolicited. It's like they're your go-to.
I've done it. And so for me in particular, majoring in philosophy, I was dead set that I was going to become a professor. Dead set. And every philosophy professor that I talked to said, do not do this.
Yeah, they warned you.
Do not do this. And I said, I feel like this is the only thing I'm going to be good at. And they said, just don't do it, because if you have any aspirations to stay in Rhode Island, this is not the career path.
Right, you're going to have to move around.
You have to go. And it's part-time jobs or, community college jobs, and it's thankless. And I said, I didn't follow their advice.
Right.
And I tried the GREs. It's the first test I've ever really bombed because I was so nervous. It was a mess. So yeah, when it comes to careers, I would just wish for unsolicited, clear,
actionable advice.
This is what you got to do.
Rather than just vague warnings.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair.
I haven't got any parenting advice, really. The only time I get unsolicited parenting advice is when, I'm talking me directly, being a dad, is when I tell a story about our daughter, and then that person immediately tells a story about their child and how it semi-relates, and this is what I should do. When I wasn't even asking for advice.
Right. Well, I think that's a natural.
I fucking hate that.
That's a natural tendency for people to.
I'm not going to tell you stories anymore.
Right, but that's how people relate, I think. But yeah, sometimes there's something to be said for just listening without having to respond with your own experience.
Like, I don't give a fuck about what your kid did in this experience. Like, I didn't ask about that. Happens all the time.
Yeah, I know. I can see, though, how someone's like, well, if I dealt with that challenge and we found this solution worked for us, but I think it depends. If you're just telling a fun story.
I'm just telling a story.
Right. If you're talking about some challenge that you're having with your kid and you sound like you just don't know where to go next and you have no idea what to do, and that person you're talking to had a similar experience and they found a solution that worked, I think it's sensible that they would present you with that as an option, but not necessarily say this is the be all end all, this is what you have to do. I think there's a lot to be said about the way that it's presented.
Pro tip, don't ask for advice when it comes to kids. I just don't.
I know. You don't have to.
I just don't.
You get it unsolicited all the time.
I do not ask. I never have told someone, our child is having this issue. I don't know how to. Never. Because no. I'll figure it out. I hate that.
I'll ask my closest friends.
No way.
But I'm very selective of who I ask.
I'm good.
Yeah. Well, if you ask 5 people, you're going to get 5 different answers.
I just remember more so this happened while you were pregnant, and they would say, oh, no, you don't want to do this. Oh, yeah. Oh, don't do that. And
it's so anxiety inducing.
I'm fucking doing it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. And we talked about this a little bit in the anti-vax episode last week, and just all the conflicting information that you find. Sometimes it's because of the groups that I was in.
Yeah, but that's internet based. I'm talking conversations
even in real life. Yeah. So I guess for me, the ones that I got that kind of, got under my skin was because I had intended to have an unmedicated birth. I had so many people respond to that with, oh, that's crazy. Just get the epidural. It's no big deal. Like, why would you, just completely questioning my decision without asking more about why or what my intentions were or whatever, to just have a conversation about it. It was just like, oh, that's silly. Like, why would you do that to yourself? Just get the epidural. Like, I'm not saying that's bad advice. I'm not saying you shouldn't get an epidural. I'm saying everybody has their own approach and everybody should do what's right for them. Like, I would have, if someone told me, a pregnant friend of mine or someone I knew said, yeah, I'm being induced on this day and whatever, or I have a scheduled C-section, or I'm going to ask for an epidural the second I arrive at the hospital, I would never be like, oh, are you sure? Maybe you should try for an unmedicated birth.
I can't, this is not my wheelhouse.
I know, I'm just saying, this is somewhere where there's a lot of advice that gets thrown around when it's a very individual decision.
Okay, so for me, in my loose understanding of women and people in general, I feel there's...
This is going to be good.
I feel there is an always, especially with women,
I don't know what it is. For men, competition is always outright.
This
It's
isn't
always
competition.
exterior. It's always in front of you. It's usually like a challenge, and I can chug this beer, bet, and shit like that. I just feel there's always this underlining tension of, oh, that bitch fucking did it. She fucking had an unmet. I can't do that shit. Fuck that.
I don't think
Fuck
that's
that
the case
bitch.
at all. At least not for my close friends who I know are like, well, that's cool, but I love the drugs they gave me.
No. I'm talking not close friends, but the people you'd have these
Yeah. Like awkward. Yeah.
acquaintances. This fucking bitch. This bitch thinks she's gonna show me.
I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I just feel like it's because when people have a good experience with something, that's what it is. They're trying.
No.
They think that
I'm watching this season of The Bachelor, and I see what these women are doing, and there is a lot of fuck that bitch in the room.
Maybe that's it.
There's
I don't know.
so much that fucking bitch in the room. To people that are sweet as pie, that fucking bitch. She said hi to me.
Maybe. I don't know. So
I
that
sense
was,
it.
So I got that a lot during my pregnancy. And then the other piece of advice related to preparing for giving birth was wait and so this is from the other side of the spectrum. This is like people who were supportive of the unmedicated birth and all that and trying to make that successful. Wait as long as you can before you go to the hospital when you're in labor.
I just feel that's an individual thing because I think on average most women have from when the water breaks until the baby
Yes, my labor was extremely fast.
Right.
But apparently I should have gone when my water broke, which happened before the contractions even started. But I was so afraid that if I went to the hospital too early, they were going to turn me away because I heard so many stories of that happening where a woman's in labor, she's having contractions, she goes to the hospital and she's only a couple centimeters dilated and they said they won't admit you until you're at least 4 centimeters or something.
It's 5 hours from when your
My
water
whole labor
broke.
was 7 hours.
I know,
Yeah.
but from when your water broke up until when we left was 5 hours.
Yeah, and she was almost born in the car. Like, it was only 40 minutes from the time we arrived at the hospital to the time that she was born.
Listen, I get it.
I
don't
took
think
that
that's
advice
bad
a
advice,
little
though.
too far.
That's not bad advice.
It wasn't bad advice, but I think I got so obsessed with that advice, and I had that, just the only thing in my head was wait as long as you can, wait as long as you can. And I ended up waiting way too long.
Yeah, I get advice about, maybe not so much anymore, but when our child was born, don't raise her like a tomboy. Don't raise her like a boy. And my response is, I'm just going to raise her like my kid.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let her dictate the pace. Obviously, when it comes to now that she's 2, there's an element of discipline, or I shouldn't say discipline. What's the word I'm looking for?
Guidance
or dissuasion from a
Sure.
situation on how
certain
to,
behaviors.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
We don't hit our child. Don't worry. Do not hit our child. I'm just saying there's an element of course correcting behavior issues, or could be behavior issues if we let them stand. Anyways, I let her dictate the pace in terms of her personality. We're getting into T-ball now. She loves playing T-ball. If she was like, fuck T-ball, well, she wouldn't say that, but if she was saying, I do not want to play T-ball, I do not like T-ball, I would say, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. And if she wants to do stereotypical girly shit instead, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if she wants to and she likes to play sports or watch baseball or football, which she doesn't, she always tells me to turn it off. But, if she liked it, I wouldn't dissuade her from doing that because she's a girl.
Right.
But there are the older generation
Yeah.
thinks, you have to raise her like a girl.
Right. I forgot about that until you just mentioned it. But we did, we made it known that we were even though we did find out, what we were having or halfway through the pregnancy, and we had a gender reveal and we did all that sort of typical stuff. But her nursery was pretty gender neutral. Most of the stuff that we bought her, the toys, and we didn't buy
you're inevitably gonna get pink shit.
Yes, but I'm saying like the big things. Like we didn't get a pink bouncer or a princess swing or anything like that. Like we tried to keep things pretty neutral. And we did get a little bit of pushback on that, I feel like, for my shower and stuff. And there were certain cases where I feel like people were maybe felt like we were taking something away from her by like not giving her girly things. Like we were actively trying to have her not be girly, but that wasn't the thing. It was just, I personally am not a big fan of like sparkly pink things. So maybe that was
it's
just a little bit
terrible.
of
It's terrible
my
on the
personality.
hands.
Right. The glitter everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's inevitable. But yeah, it was just, we didn't want to just like have that be the only thing that she was ever exposed to.
I will say that I do think in some respects, if we found out we were having a boy instead of a girl, I'd be just speaking as a dad and as a dude, I'd be more inclined to push the sports aspect in the bedroom just because it's what I relate to. Whereas for a girl, I don't know how to fucking decorate a girl's room. I don't know. So I left that to you, and you took the ball with it and you dictated the pace. I'm not saying if we had a boy, it'd be decked out in all blue shit. We'd probably still have the same like sort of rustic theme, but I definitely include like a rustic baseball diamond or something, or baseball or something.
Mm-hmm.
It would be incorporated. And I would probably, no, I shouldn't say that, because I did make an active effort to incorporate sports into our child's life.
Yeah.
Like a very active effort.
Regardless of
Yes.
their gender. Yeah. So I think we did a whole episode on gender roles pretty early on that touches on some of this stuff. I think that's a bigger conversation than just advice. But yeah, so I guess the last thing before we take a break, and then we can dive into some of our listener feedback on this. There was one response that we got that was so well thought out and kind of is likely going to turn into an episode on its own. I think we can have it stand alone, but it basically was about asking yourself hard questions. And I think it's in terms of, and I've heard this called the relationship escalator before. It's like kind of like the expectations that we have of how you go through life. You date someone.
Oh,
you get engaged after a year or two.
Yeah.
You fall in love, you get engaged. A year or two later, you get married.
6 years.
Yeah, if you're us. And then in a year or two, you have a baby. And in that whole time leading up to, you're being asked, are you pregnant yet? When are you going to have kids? Are you going to have a family? Yada, yada. And then I feel like there's definitely a tendency sometimes for people to fall into that, I don't want to call it a trap, but that pattern of expectations, even if it's not really what you want or on the timeline that you want. And so, yeah, I'm going to let them speak to it more when we have them on the podcast. But I think they just had some really great thought-provoking questions for people to ask themselves when they're making those decisions.
Okay.
So.
Oh, hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Champs here. Anyways. So, all right, let's take a break here then, and we'll come back with the listener feedback as to their experiences with unsolicited advice, I should say. Okay, hang tight.
All right, so I already mentioned that I felt like this was kind of a good progression from the anti-vax episode last week, because I think there's certainly a tendency for unsolicited advice from that community
Oh yeah.
about whether or not to vaccinate your children. But I think there's an important component of all of this when we're talking about parenting advice. I feel like there is a pretty fine line between giving someone parenting advice and then parent shaming. And I think sometimes this goes back to how it's presented and the context and the relationship that you have with the person. But if it's presented in such a way, like we were talking about before, if you're saying, I'm really struggling with this with my kid, and someone responds with, oh, we had that problem too. Here's what we did. Maybe you can give this a try. That's almost bordering on not even unsolicited because you're having a conversation about it. But that sort of approach is very different from someone saying, what are you, crazy? You're going to inject these toxins into your kid? And then diving in and explaining to you all of the bad shit that's in vaccines. That's
that
really
they
not
read on the
vaccines.
internet.
Yeah, exactly.
So on a
or they
YouTube
read
video.
on the vaccine insert, which I was surprised. We forgot to even talk about that last
Or
week.
a meme.
But that's what they always say is, did you read the insert? And it's like, you don't understand what the insert says because you're not a pharmacist or
Sure.
a doctor. But anyway, I think that all of
Piling
this,
it on the anti-vaxxers.
I'm sorry. I know that just gets me. But my brain is back in that space when I was pregnant and reading all of this stuff and getting so aggravated and angry at how people approach it. Because when we were talking last week about how to have these conversations with people, maybe who are hesitant about the COVID vaccine, there's this ongoing theme of you're not really going to get anywhere unless you approach it with empathy and trying to understand where that person is coming from. And so I feel like that's sort of the difference too when we're talking about parent shaming versus unsolicited advice, shoving things down your throat, telling you this is the only way to do it. Two totally different things. So
they're already dead. Lay off them. You don't have to keep beating them.
What?
You never seen that Simpsons meme? Stop it. He's already
terrible,
dead.
terrible.
I'm not talking about them. Forget it. You're just beating on them.
I know. Sorry. Okay. So we did a couple of polls. The first one was just to get an idea of how many people have experienced this. And again, this was more focused specifically on parenting. How many people have actually received unsolicited advice?
Sure.
And not shockingly, it was the vast majority. 88% of the people who voted have received unsolicited advice. The next question was it helpful?
Oh.
And 88% said no.
It hardly ever is.
Right. So then after that, we asked for some specific examples of unsolicited advice that people have received. And so there's one like larger category. I guess we can save that for the end, that there was quite a pattern with one particular topic. But a couple of different ones. There was one that this person was told constantly when she was going, so she had one child, a toddler, and she was pregnant with her second, and she was going through a really hard time in her life, and she was constantly told, you need to be strong for your children.
I mean, you do.
So on its face, I feel like that seems like good advice, but at the same time, I think there's something to be said for showing or letting your child see that you're human and that having feelings is normal and okay, and expressing your feelings in a healthy way is a good coping mechanism, and kind of like demonstrating how to cope with hard things, and talking about your feelings and not being afraid to be emotional to a certain extent. Of course, you don't want to be.
Yeah, I don't know the extent of the issue that this individual was going through, so I can't necessarily speak to that. But I do think it depends. If you're debilitated because you're super depressed and you're not, I'm just spitballing here.
Right.
I don't know who said this. I don't know the example. But if you're just so depressed that you're not getting up to give your kid breakfast or something, then we have a problem.
Of course, that's why I'm saying in healthy ways.
Sure.
I'm saying I don't think it's a bad thing to let your kids see, at least sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes see you have feelings and see that you are dealing with your feelings in a healthy way.
I don't know that. I mean, if we're taking what you just said in the most, literal sense, obviously the child knows you have feelings. You're playing with the child, you're having fun, you're laughing. You're not this blank.
Right, but for them to, like, if you're sad, I think it's okay to say, yeah, mommy's a little bit sad right now, but everything will be okay. Thank you for being there for me.
I guess.
Or, well, maybe you don't want to tell your kid that it's their responsibility to be there for you.
I don't know that I can relate to this.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know the extent to what this individual is going through. I don't know. But in personal experience, and again, you can call this toxic masculinity or whatever, there is...
Oh, don't worry, that's coming.
Yeah, there is a notion for me to say, deal with your shit on your own time. Like, deal with this shit with you as talking to myself.
Right, but then when your kids are having a hard time or are upset or angry or whatever, and they're so young that they don't really know how to regulate those feelings yet, they're not going to... If they never see you express your emotions and your feelings, I feel like it could lead to them doing the same, bottling up.
I don't think so.
Well, as kids, I think that, yeah, but how they express it is different. Like, they might just come across as a tantrum or screaming constantly. I mean, we're also not parenting experts by any means. We have one child who's in the thick of it at 2.5, and we're making it up as we go every day.
I do think there's an element of, you want your child to not worry about you. You want your child to
you want to protect them from the big, heavy things. Like, you don't want to put a burden on them. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I feel like because this person received this advice constantly and over and over and over from so many different people, I think it made her feel like she wasn't permitted to grieve or to do what she had to do to cope with her difficult time, because she always had to put on a brave face and be strong for her kids. And that was an unhealthy thing for her to do.
I guess my legitimate question is why, playing devil's advocate, why couldn't you just do this when you're not around your kids? Like,
because grief doesn't...
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, for me, it's making it sound like this person did not have an opportunity to grieve. But that's not necessarily true, right? I'm just of the philosophy that I don't want my children, or child in this case, to worry. I don't want them to worry about me.
Thinking, like, even when it maybe not in this specific example, talking about grief and all of that is,
especially
a larger
if it was
conversation
a loss
for someone with a
that
degree.
My child doesn't understand.
Yeah.
If my child was old enough to understand what it means to have someone, pass away, then you could express that. But if my child is 2 and doesn't, like she is right now, and doesn't understand the aspect of someone dying, that's
but you have to explain it to them.
But even then, she wouldn't understand.
Right, but she would understand, this person is gone. We can't see them again, or I can't see them. I'm not going to see them again, and I'm sad. That's okay.
I guess. That's
okay.
I don't know. I just, there's an element that I want to protect my children or child. I
understand, but you can't protect them from everything. And I think for them to think that it's not okay to show your emotion, or for them to see someone demonstrate a healthy way of dealing with a certain feeling, is counterproductive.
I don't know. My reaction to that is, I'm teaching you to make sure your children aren't worrying.
Okay.
That's all.
We should do a whole episode on it.
Anyways,
this is like a parenting style type thing. But anyway, that advice...
This is no offense to the person that is going through. It's just a difference of philosophy.
But, and I think this is probably something that we will evolve and adapt in either direction as we deal with being parents of a young child. But I think the point is, the advice was constant and unsolicited.
Yes.
And it put her in a really bad place of feeling like she wasn't given the space to have her own feelings.
Yes,
and that all she was a mom and had to be strong all the time. And that's not a helpful thing to say to someone who's already having a hard time.
Got it.
The next one was, boys will be boys about, so this is something that boy moms get a lot. And it's, to me, it's such an easy thing for people to just like any sort of bad behavior or aggressive behavior or destructive tendencies or anything like that when in a boy, it's just, boys will be boys. It's like an excuse. And it's also getting into the gender role thing of this is just how boys are, rather than each boy having their own personality and maybe liking things that aren't typically boy things.
Yes. So when we did research for the toxic masculinity episode, I researched a study, and it was a legitimate controlled study, and it was peer reviewed and stuff, and I think it was either Harvard or Stanford. I remember sending it to you, and there is evidence. I'm not saying this is conclusive. I'm not saying this is the be all end all. There is evidence that males at a younger age tend to be more aggressive. That's not to say females aren't aggressive.
Yeah.
Males tend to be more aggressive, and even like babies, maybe a couple months old, or, when do they start seeing? 8 months, where they develop a good sense of sight.
I don't know.
Thereabouts.
I don't think that takes that long.
Okay. We'll just say a couple months old. The male babies tend to gravitate towards the quote unquote boy things, and and that could be a result of the environment that they're in.
Right. There's a lot of variables.
Sure.
Yeah.
But there is evidence to support that there is not obviously this isn't a blanket thing, but there is evidence to support that young males gravitate to the boy shit and females gravitate to the girl shit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't exist to some extent, but there's always exceptions.
Right, so boys will be boys is a huge generalization,
right? But
there is evidence to suggest that males are more aggressive and, I shouldn't say violent, but they are very, I don't know, destructive, a little bit more destructive than females. But
yeah, I'm not saying
having a daughter, she's destructive.
Right. I'm not saying there's not any seed of truth to it, or that it's not based on some type of pattern that people have seen over and over. But yeah, I think so. This is kind of two pronged. There's the boys will be boys, like they're destructive, they're aggressive, they're whatever.
Females aren't docile.
Right. That's true. We were just talking about watched The Bachelor.
Yes. I'm just saying toddlers.
Yeah,
female toddlers are not docile creatures.
Toddlers are just their own beasts.
Yes.
But yeah, I just feel like sometimes that could be chalked up to an excuse, and not even as children, just as adults too. Boys will be boys with inappropriate behavior. People just kind of use that as a broad brush to excuse inappropriate behavior rather than trying to correct it.
Right.
But then the other piece is kind of what you were just talking about, the gender role piece. And I feel like this is what this mom was referring to of, people, we talked a little bit about how we wanted our, take a sort of a gender neutral approach with clothing and the decor and the nursery and stuff like that. Boy moms, I feel like, are faced with pushback if their boy is interested in girl things, and people have this preconceived notion of, it's a boy, so I'm going to get him a monster truck, or I'm going to get him whatever, a sports thing.
I think that also depends on the parents. Usually, like if we had a boy, a lot of people would be getting Bills, Blue Jays, and Raptors shit just because they know. No, they just would because they know I'm into it.
Right. Well, you've gotten that for our girl.
Of course.
Right. But other people don't really get her sports stuff, generally
No one
speaking.
has ever done it.
But this boy mom, her son does gravitate towards quote unquote girly things, and she gets pushback, and she's like, so what? He's a boy. He likes whatever, like Frozen. I mean, every kid likes Frozen. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, but yeah, I can see how that's frustrating if you're trying to take the approach of not pigeonholing your kid based on their gender.
That's a
and
very
just trying
boomer, though.
it is.
thing.
I feel like that's true. I bet the majority of this pushback is from the older generation.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't see, unless you're an asshole.
Yeah.
I can't see anybody within our demographic saying,
Well, there's still teasing that happens at the kid level. And then how the parents of those kids react, the parents who are our
yeah,
generation,
sure.
is
Kids
still,
are going to tease, though. Kids are fucking
right, but
disastrous
that's where it
creatures.
comes down to, can you trust the other parents to not be assholes? And
I
to,
don't know. That's,
I know
Whatever.
we haven't gotten there yet. School age is going to be a new thing.
You teach your child, or as much as you can, to be strong and to not give a fuck.
Yeah. Well, I'm not just talking about handling the bullying. I'm saying, like, if those parents will say to their kid, oh, he's not weird because he wanted to be whatever, a princess for Halloween.
I feel that's becoming more and more common.
It is.
And
as
that's
it should
not,
be.
Again, not trying to push this. Oh, because, even though this is true, it's not because transgenderism, which is not what we're talking about at all.
No, we're not
But
at all.
Even becoming, no, I'm just saying people can mistakenly make that link.
Yes.
Right. So I don't think necessarily that has anything to do with it, but that is not, and you just gave the Frozen example. I've seen multiple videos of boys wanting to dress up as Elsa.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple.
That's what I mean.
It's not uncommon anymore.
I know. But you know that there are the jerk parents out there who would be like, what are you doing? Take that off.
I feel they're the minority.
I hope so. I do.
All right, continue.
So the struggles of boy moms, we got some feedback on that. So the last set of answers that we got were all related to feeding and how you feed your child. And there's so many common answers and also ones that we've experienced. So one that we got a lot of was the advice to put some rice cereal in their bottle.
We got that.
We got that. I think everybody gets that because I think it's just outdated advice. Of course, none of this advice is meant to be malicious or, it's just people genuinely think they're giving you a useful tip. And often this is from the older generation who raised their own kids, but it was like 30 years ago. And then, things change. Like the car seats we have now are different.
Yeah.
There are new vaccines that they didn't have 30 years ago. There's a lot of different advances and changes that have happened. So I think it's really hard to kind of shut down this advice, even though it's well-intentioned, can actually be really bad advice. Like it could be unsafe advice. There's a reason why we don't do it anymore and why doctors don't recommend it. And this is one of them. Putting cereal in a bottle for an infant, like a newborn, is a choking hazard. They're not supposed to have anything other than breast milk or formula at that age. So one person who responded said their child was 4 days old when someone said, oh, they're not sleeping, you should put some cereal in their bottle.
Oh, fuck no.
They're not supposed to sleep for a long time at 4 days old. They're supposed to wake up and eat every couple of hours. Like that's normal. And you can't give a 4-day-old infant cereal. It's just very dangerous. And I think it also can make you second guess if what your child's sleeping patterns, if it's normal. Like if you talk to someone with a 4-day-old and you say, oh yeah, well, they're waking up every 2 hours or so to eat. And they're like, oh my God, you should put some cereal in the bottle so they'll actually sleep. Makes you think, oh man, maybe there's something wrong with my child. Maybe they're hungry, maybe whatever. Especially if you're a first-time parent, that can make you totally second guess everything. And you're already sleep deprived and in such a vulnerable state at that point after, especially for the mom recovering from birth and all of that. It's just a lot. It's just like one simple comment or piece of unsolicited advice can really put, be a spiral.
Yeah, I don't get that. I just say no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That didn't end. Well, I did because I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but I guess it was more so the frustration to me.
Can't relate. I just say no.
Yeah.
Not doing it.
It's also if it's just given once and you say, okay, thanks, and that's the end of it, I think that makes a difference too. But if a few days later the person who gave you that unsolicited advice is like, hey, so did the rice cereal in the bottle go well for you? And you say, no, I don't think we're going to do that. And then you get pushback, or then they say it again. If it's repeated unsolicited advice and this person is totally unreceptive to you telling them, sorry, it's not 1980, we don't do that anymore, that makes a big difference.
Then I'd say, yeah, you can do that with your baby.
Right. Yeah.
The only pushback I ever got when it comes to food or the aspect of food when it comes to our child was I was at work and a coworker said, can you believe that so-and-so's son won't feed his son McDonald's? And I said, yeah, that makes sense. What? Your kid's never going to have a Happy Meal? No. I will never purchase a Happy Meal for my child. You live in America. And yeah, I don't want to fucking give my child. It's like, I might as well give her a Budweiser and a Marlboro too, I guess. Like, what do you want? No, I'm not going to give my child a Happy Meal. Will she have McDonald's in her life? Probably. But I'm not going to be the one to fucking give her death. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And death in a bag. And yeah, it's probably harmless, but we don't support.
In moderation.
Sure. We don't support fast food restaurants. I'm not doing it. I'm just
I mean, it's not part of
I'm not establishing that culture.
Right.
In my child's diet.
Yeah.
And the lack of understanding in relation to that was staggering because it was that's just what you do. You get your child a Happy Meal and they get a toy. No, I'm not fucking doing it.
Yeah.
And you lead by example, right? I don't eat it. I will not give you something I would not eat.
Right.
And I will not eat that. And we've had some experience with fast food, the aspect of giving our child fast food, and it was an immediate no. We're not doing that.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think we recognize that that's the norm. That's most people do buy Happy. I mean, we grew up on it too. We had fast food when we were kids, but I just think I wish that more people reacted. Like, I don't know. It's just similar to the like unmedicated birth thing that I was saying. Like, just be like, oh, that's what you're choosing to do? Cool. Like, rather than what? Why would you do that?
There's a cultural aspect. There's
cultural aspect to both.
I don't know that is as pervasive. It being unmedicated birth is not nearly as pervasive in our culture as fast food is.
No. But I'm saying getting an epidural or a C-section is as normalized as eating fast food.
Yes.
So I'm saying that departure from the norm is met with disbelief and confusion and pushback versus.
But they get angry.
Yeah, I've seen that happen.
Like, why are you angry about the dietary choices
I just think it's confusion.
Why are you mad?
I just think it's confusion.
It's no. And then it gets to the point where I'm sorry, person. I'm not giving my child fast food because I don't want them ending up looking like you. That is the problem. I don't want my child to have heart disease or high blood pressure when she's in her 40s. Like, right. I just don't want that. I think that's a good thing. Sorry.
Yeah. It's right. What we feel is right for our family. Yeah. I had a feeling you were going to bring that up. Most of the feedback we got was related to infant feeding. But we've definitely, there's certainly, and then there's the whole concept too of baby-led weaning versus giving your kid purees as they start moving into solids. Do you remember any of this?
Nope. No idea what the fuck that is.
There are some parents who think that, and again, this is a product of me inadvertently getting spammed with this kind of stuff in the crunchy Facebook mom world, that kids will be less picky if you introduce them to like whole foods rather than purees when they're like 6 months old, when they're ready to move away or start weaning from breastfeeding or formula. And they give them like whole pieces of food, like cut in long strips basically, and let them gnaw on it. And I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. I think both ways are fine, whatever people decide to do. But there was, again, some fear mongering of you can't combo. You can't do some baby-led weaning and some purees because it will confuse the child and they'll choke to death. And it's just like, I just want to feed my kid. Like, and I'm going to talk to my pediatrician about what are the safe foods that my child can eat at this age and what is the correct way to prepare them. And that's all I want to do. Like, I don't need to hear all this other like horror stories and warnings of, well, if you do baby-led weaning, they're going to choke. But if you only give them purees, they're going to be picky eaters and they're not going to know how to like eat real food. It's like, none of that is true. Like, your kid's going to be fine.
Yeah, I don't think there are any 30-year-olds that are having trouble eating because they had purees.
Right, we all grew up on purees. Baby-led weaning wasn't a thing. And again, that's not to say that there's not benefits to it. It's not to say that that's not a beneficial thing for some kids or some parents. But it's just neither of those things are the be-all and end-all. And I feel like that's how people tend to approach it when they're giving you unsolicited advice about how to transition to solids with your infant. And of course, the other one that is always described, not always, often described as a be-all, end-all is breastfeeding.
Sure.
And so many moms go through this of feeling pressured to say, you know, the whole breast is best thing versus fed is best. I know you're like rolling your eyes because you're not like,
I don't
but
give
you
a
haven't
fuck.
been involved. I know. Yeah. Lucky for you. You didn't have to deal with any of this.
Of course I care about the struggle. I don't care what my child is eating, just as long as my child is eating. Yes.
And healthy, of course. So I feel like a lot of
women,
women,
where the tap is,
right, get pressured. And I feel like it's always presented as are you going to breastfeed or are you going to use formula? And you have to choose one. I think
having a goal for one or the other is good. I think saying, hey, I'm going to try breastfeeding, but I have this as a backup. Mm-hmm. Or saying, no, I'm not interested. There are women that are saying, I don't want to breastfeed. Of course,
and that's totally fine too.
I get it. I'm just saying having a plan.
Yeah. Having a preference is, yes. But I feel like a lot of times people are meant to think it's one or the other. We combo fed for a long time. She got formula and breast milk until I was able to actually breastfeed.
Yeah. Me too.
For the first couple months. We had to use formula to supplement, and I didn't know.
This, I'm being honest.
You don't remember the little tiny bottles of formula and like pouring half formula and half breast milk?
I do remember stealing it from the hospital.
Yeah. And I would pump for like an hour, and I'd get like half an ounce, and we'd mix it in with the formula. Yeah. And I just think that that's not presented as an option, and people get this unsolicited advice of, oh, you have to breastfeed, and if you introduce formula, you'll never be able to breastfeed. Or people who there was one of our listeners said she was told, so she had tried to breastfeed for a while, but she couldn't. Her milk never came in, and when her child was a few months old, someone said to her, oh, why are you using formula? You just try breastfeeding again. Like, just because you didn't in the beginning doesn't mean that you can't. And she was like, it kind of does. Like, that's how it works.
You should just say, my supply, you do it. Here you go.
Yeah. You haven't breastfed.
Just do it.
Yeah, you haven't breastfed in a while, but
just do it.
I'm sure something will come out of the tap.
Just do it. It'll work. It'll come out. That's what they're there for.
I mean, and this is all to say, there are plenty of specialists at like lactation consultants who can walk you through the whole thing and your different options. But someone who's just kind of off the street, or even if they're a fellow parent or a fellow mom who's had similar struggles, every single person is different, and that sort of pressure can have serious impacts on a mom's mental health.
It's the boomers.
It's
boomers.
I feel like that's everywhere.
We got anything else?
I think that's it.
We're running long. Okay. Well, if you have any experiences with unsolicited advice and you did not get the opportunity to weigh in on our Instagram page and or our Facebook page, and even though we shared on Facebook earlier in the episode, so we'll just lean towards the Instagram, please do. We'd like to hear from you, or if you want to email us, you can. We want to hear your stories, and we'll respond the best way we can without giving you unsolicited advice. But anyways, if you've enjoyed yourself and if you've enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe to the show. We appreciate it. Again, we're on all your favorite podcatchers, I should say. And if you have the opportunity, please give us 5 stars and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. And again, if you want to weigh in on the conversation, you can.
We're on Facebook at facebook.com/whileshe'snapping, on Instagram at whileshe'snapping, on Twitter at she'snappingpod, or you can email us at whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
I don't know what we're doing next week. It depends. If we have the guests.
Yeah, we
next
might have our
week.
guests.
If not, I want to talk about either the QAnon, the fallout, or the nature of sports fanhood and how it can just rip you apart.
Crush you. Yeah.
So we'll see. But until then, thanks for listening. Peace.
Bye.